Hello and welcome back, Eddie Radosevich, Josh McCuistion from Sooner Scoop HQ down in Houston. I'm over here at Campus Quarter. George Stoya obviously on vacation on this Sunday evening, but the news doesn't stop. Oklahoma wrapping up ChampUBBQ weekend, a possible quarterback commitment coming up on Monday, an actual commitment coming out on Sunday afternoon in Emmanuel Choice. We'll get to him here shortly, but first things first, Josh. A massive recruiting weekend down in Norman. ChampUBBQ coming to a close here on a Sunday evening. Let's kind of just rapid fire here in a way. Andrew Babaloa was in town. CJ Nixon, kid from Weatherford, Oklahoma, was, I think, getting closer and closer to committing. But first things first, let's just kind of talk storylines coming out of ChampUBBQ weekend for you.
Yeah, the things I would say in some of the conversations I've had so far through Sunday is just an overwhelming success. It's like that. And again, it's kind of like the draft or on signing day. Like everybody thinks it went great right after the visits the visitors start heading home. But I definitely, when you talk to people, some of the things happening behind the scenes, you're like, oh, okay. Like even a lot of the commitments I talk to who, are there and they're trying to have a good time and that kind of thing too. You could tell some of those guys, like I will say Malik Hawkins, for example, kind of talked about it like it was a business trip. Like I went up there, I did some recruiting, like he was working on guys. So I think that is something you definitely want to watch. Like I said, we're going to talk about Manny Choice here in a little bit and his decision. Obviously, that was something that I think people – if they were paying attention, should have kind of thought maybe that was in the offing for Oklahoma. Still waiting on CJ Nixon. I still feel really good about that situation. Honestly, there is a feeling of just like, when is this thing going to happen? Like I know everything I heard, that visit went extremely well.
Yeah, I think people have seen the probably the pictures that are out on social media. I think that hit on Saturday night, a big group picture of a bunch of Oklahoma commits, and obviously CJ Nixon was in it. So I think that maybe that's just a matter of time in terms of Oklahoma adding to the class. Andrew Babaloa, obviously we've talked time and time again about 2025 recruiting, especially on the offensive line. I know there's been some new predictions. I think that you flipped your prediction for Tai Haywood. Not necessarily on the heels of his visit to Tallahassee, but more so because he didn't make it into Norman. How did everything go with Andrew Babaloa? And then obviously Lamont Rogers last week and Michael Fasusa. We had talked about them at the end of last week about Oklahoma's recruitment of those guys. Maybe sort of a little bit more comfortable spot for Oklahoma for a number of guys outside of the Tai Haywood news.
Yeah, there is, I would say around Norman, there's a lot of optimism about the offensive line position. And we've talked over and over and over about how big these recruitments are. And I think Andrew Babalola has almost kind of fallen, like he almost becomes this secondary thought for OU fans. And that's not that they don't love him or that kind of thing, but there's so much focus on the three guys in Dallas with Haywood, Fasusi, and Rogers that I think Babalola just kind of being up on his own in Kansas, people kind of, forget him's not the right term. He just kind of gets left behind sometimes in the conversation. From what I gathered, things went really well. I know he had some time, for those that don't know, this is a very academically driven kid. I know Oklahoma really set some time for him to sit down with a lot of people around the business school, which is what he's planning to major in. And I get the impression that went very well. Again, talking about some things behind the scenes, I think he kind of dug in and is searching for a little bit more information, wants to know even more about OU's business school. So you always take those as good signs. He's a tough kid to read. He's not a guy that, I'm going to hear from a source that, oh yeah, OU's got him. Like nobody's overly confident because you just don't know. But at the same time, I think that went really well. I would say another guy that I don't want people to forget about that I think had a really good visit. I think Oklahoma, I've had a prediction in for him for a long time, and that's Max Granville, the edge rusher from Fort Bend Christian in Sugar Land, Texas. I had a chance to speak with his father this morning, planning to catch up with Max here a little bit later. I just think Oklahoma has such a great relationship with him, and it's really spearheaded by Miguel Chavis. No surprise. That's something Chavis is one of the elite recruiters in the country when it comes to his ability to connect with kids, connect with their families. He really does a great job with that, and I think that is something that's going to mean a lot in this recruitment. Texas A&M's made a big run. I'm not saying anything's over. I'm not going that far with it, but I really like where Oklahoma is. And again, with I guess I kind of bypassed the Lamont Rogers and Michael Fasusi conversation. Michael went to Texas. Lamont went to Florida State. I still think Oklahoma is very real in this race. What's going to be interesting with Fasusi is, and really Rogers as well, Oklahoma's kind of battling for two guys where Oklahoma has a multitude of options. There's a couple ways they can win here with Babalola, with Fasusi, with Rogers. They really just need to get one of those guys. And then they've really kind of done what they needed to do at offensive tackle. But with both of these guys, with Rogers, A&M's kind of made him their primary guy, while Texas has done the same with Fasusi. What does that mean with NIL? How does that look? So there's some variables in there that, as the list starts to dwindle, you kind of have to figure out how that's going to work. But again, I think Oklahoma feels very comfortable that they're going to get one of these guys, but there's some chips in the air about, who that one would be.
Let me ask you this. How the hell does Oklahoma make the top 3 of Tai Haywood? Like, is that real? Is, I guess, my question. And by the way, on Sunday, 5-star offensive tackle, in case you don't know, Tai Haywood, on the heels of a trip to Tallahassee, Oklahoma, Alabama, and Florida State, are his top 3 officially.
Yeah, told our guy Chad Simmons. With Tai, it's hard to know. Tai doesn't say much. I was surprised he was that candid with it. And it's not that Ty's not a good interview. He just kind of plays it close to the vest. But what I will say, my impression in talking to people around Tuscaloosa and talking to some folks around Norman as well, I think the thing was all along, and this is something, Eddie, you and I have talked about Tai Haywood a lot.
Yeah.
There was always this feeling of like, look out for Alabama. Like Oklahoma just always kind of had to look over their shoulder. This is a kid from Mississippi. His mother grew up, like liking Alabama, having an appreciation for Alabama. I was told that visit went incredibly well. Alabama hit all the right notes with her, and really, there were some people that mentioned like she almost got emotional at points. Like it was just so. This is kind of what I want my son to do, and so I think that was a big part of this. So when you think about that, it does. It calls into question all of the, the missed official visit the next week at Oklahoma and then going to Florida State. I put in that prediction for Alabama prior to his Florida State visit because I don't think it matters. And when you talk to people around Dallas with Tai Haywood, it was always like, oh, he loves Oklahoma. He loves Oklahoma. He loves what Bill Bedenbaugh's doing. He loves all this stuff. But Alabama is what he talks about when he talks about his dream school. And so it was kind of a head versus heart is I kind of think what it came down to, because he doesn't have the relationship with Alabama that he does with Oklahoma. But, sometimes the heart just wins. I think that's what's going to end up playing out here with Tai Haywood. I think Oklahoma did everything they could have done. Like this isn't something where you get to be mad at somebody. Sometimes you just get beat. And I think that's what's happened here.
Relatively still good shape with the other 3 guys, though, moving forward. And certainly Tai Haywood hasn't made a commitment by any means. Maybe Oklahoma makes up a little bit of ground, and all of a sudden it seems like this thing changes every other day just in terms of, where he might be interested in playing college football. So the big story of the day, though, on Sunday afternoon was the commitment of Emmanuel Choice, another wide receiver for Emmett Jones, who continues to it's kind of old news now just in terms of, well, Emmett Jones added another wide receiver to the position group.
And what's crazy, Eddie, is when Emmett came in, it was all like, well, look out at Duncanville and Lancaster and South Oak Cliff and all the places where Emmett has either worked or knew people. He's got so many coaching connections kind of in that, south of 20 area there in Dallas. And this is the first guy that, like, for all the recruiting success, this, I believe, unless I'm just forgetting someone, is the first guy that kind of comes from that group of schools that, with him being a Lancaster Tiger. I like Emmanuel Choice a lot. This is a guy, and people kind of look at his ranking and kind of wonder, this is a guy Emmett Jones targeted early. Oklahoma was his first offer. They've wasted no time. As soon as they saw him, they knew this was a guy they wanted. And I think it's a lot what we talk about, Eddie. When I talk about a receiver room, they want to make it a basketball team. You've got your point guards. You got your Grayson Harris's, the guy that are quick. You're going to put them in space and try to let them make plays against bigger defensive backs. This is a guy, I mean, Eddie, we saw him at Dallas, at the Dallas Under Armour camp. It's a big dude. I mean, legitimately 6'4" and whatever change is left. He's a big guy, huge reach. I would bet he's plus in the, wingspan versus height kind of conversation. If his wingspan was 6'7", I wouldn't be surprised. He's an enormous individual and really catches it well with his hands. Yeah, you can see some of the video we got here in Dallas, and just a big guy, really strong with his hands. And the thing that sticks out to me is you would assume a guy like this would just really play big and over the top, but he's a good route runner. I think he's got a lot of body control. So again, I think this is a very complete player that I think will surprise some people, both in his ability and kind of the way he plays. He's a little different than maybe people have in their head.
I want to get a little bit more into just the wide receiver position group as a whole now in this 2025 class. You're up to a quartet. How good is this group? Like nationally, it seems like he's, as you said, building a basketball team. Like they're hitting all these spots, if you will. Elijah Thomas on the screen right now.
Yeah, I mean, we all know, like our fandom between you and I of Elijah Thomas and what his potential is. I mean, he's just a unbelievably gifted athlete. And, we talk about guys like Marcus Harris and, Emmanuel Choice and Grayson Harris. These are guys that have spent a lot of time with trainers and working in that, in Dallas or, in Marcus Harris's case in Southern California. Elijah Thomas, just a guy getting by on natural God-given ability and what his coaches have taught him. He's going to be so different with a year under Emmett Jones that'll change his game dramatically. But then, you look at, like I said, what I like is Elijah Thomas and Marcus Harris. You kind of have that middle ground where Marcus Harris is maybe a little closer to Grayson Harris. Well, Elijah Thomas is a little bit bigger. He's your forward or your wing or whatever you want to call it. And then you've got your center, in Manny Choice. So again, there's just a lot of variety in this group. And I think they can attack you in a lot of different ways. I love, you talk about Lancaster. That's a team consistently making deep runs in the playoffs. We all know what modern day is with Marcus Harris. Elijah Thomas had Chakota, making the playoffs, which is just not a common thing. And then Grayson Harris at Ennis. I mean, that's a program not far removed from, state titles. So this is a group also very accustomed, with winning. They know what it takes. And again, I like what all of them bring. They're just all a little different. You're not getting some of the overlap that I think at times we've seen in OU wide receiver recruiting. These guys all have very specific ideas and roles.
Certainly some tools for Kevin Sperry to use here in his 2025 class. And, let me ask you this. Is it crazy to think that Oklahoma could take 5 wide receivers? Is that a possibility in the 2025 class that 5 wide receivers could be something that we're looking at here before this thing wraps up in December?
The thing that I'm about to say stuns me, Eddie. I can't believe that I could answer yes to this question because a week ago I wouldn't have believed it.
Sure.
But that is where we're at. I mean, I think Cortez Mills, the wide receiver from Florida, is a guy that Oklahoma just loves. I mean, and I've said it before. You go look at the tape, you can understand, like, he was one of the real risers in the spring where, I want to say for most, he was probably in that 250 range, kind of coming out of the winter and into the spring. And as more people saw him at 7-on-7 and went over his junior tape, I want to say he's like 105 or something in the On3 industry ranking. Like, he's really climbed for a lot of people. And I talked about it a lot. There was a picture that came up of him, and I can't even remember where I saw it, but it was a picture of him, Marcus Harris, and Emmett Jones, and Cortez Mills' length. I mean, I was talking about positive wingspan. I totally admit I got that from some of the NBA draft stuff I've been listening to from our, the guys that are Down to Dunk. I want to give them a little shout out, but he has to be at probably 6'1", 6'2". His wingspan's got to be 6'5". I mean, he is extremely long, catches it with his hands. I really like him, and I think it's just a deal where Oklahoma's saying he's too good for us to pass on. And I think that visit went really well. I think it was extremely interesting that Cortez Mills canceled his Miami visit last weekend. Now, he ended up going to LSU, so I think some of the talk of, he's committed and he was just canceling that trip and he doesn't want to put it out yet, I don't think it's that because we all know if you're committed to Oklahoma, you can't take more official visits or trips in general. So he was at LSU over the weekend. I'm sure that went well. Um, at the same time, I still really like where Oklahoma is. I know for a long time Clemson was kind of the leader here. I, if Oklahoma hasn't at least pulled even, I'd be very surprised. I think they probably nosed ahead a little bit here. But again, this is going to be one of those things where it's great for Oklahoma to want that. Does he want to be part of a 5-man receiver class?
Sure.
And that's something that we can't know just yet.
And just for the sake of clarity, wrapping everything up here as we get to Sunday evening, official visits are done. You're now entering into what is a dead period, and it'll just be kind of interesting to see how these dominoes end up starting to fall over the next couple weeks.
Hey, midnight tonight, we're the only people that can go visit anybody, Eddie. So,
Sure.
I know you're ready to get out on the road, just do all that. We've done so little the last few weeks. But
It's been
yeah,
busy.
this is when, people ask, Josh, when are the commitments coming? Well, they've already started. Obviously, Manny Choice. I think we're all kind of waiting on CJ Nixon. Obviously, Monday we'll have the announcement of Jaden O'Neal. So there is a lot that's going to happen that's going to come forward here. And again, that forgets Mark Iannaccio, Elijah Melendez. I mean, you just go down the list. There are a lot of commitments, and Oklahoma is going to lose some of them. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's all going to go perfectly for OU, and they're going to have to decide which guys can't be part of their 32-man class in 2025. But I do think Oklahoma fans are going to have a good upcoming month. I think these visits went really well. I still think they're going to get one of these key offensive tackles. And to me, if you can do that, land a couple more defensive linemen, I really think almost everything else at that point is just kind of icing on the cake.
You mentioned it coming up on Monday, late afternoon here in the state of Oklahoma. I believe it's 4 o'clock loosely. Jaden O'Neal, 2026 quarterback. I think a name that has become very familiar to Oklahoma fans. He will be making his announcement. Just in terms of a preview, still feels pretty confident about, just the situation that Seth Luttrell and Brent Venables go into Monday afternoon with the announcement on deck.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think I would be surprised if Seth Luttrell's ever spent that much time worrying about a recruit. He just seems so not of that vein to me. Like, there's things I'm sure get him worked up, but I don't think it's recruiting. But at the same time, I think he's done a great job here. Like I just talking to Jaden, talking to people around the kid, like I think there was a real connection there. And one of the things that Jaden's brought up to me several times is how much Seth and the way he handles things is reminiscent of Jaden's father. And I think that's a big deal when you kind of note just what that kid kind of expects, what his work ethic is like, what he is just as a player. So I think that is all really big for OU. And again, maybe something crazy happens. You never rule anything out in recruiting. I know Ohio State made a recent offer, and they always do. Obviously, they're outstanding recruiters, but it feels like everybody else is chasing Oklahoma here.
For Seth Luttrell, just individually moving into somewhat of his first, run at quarterbacks, just as Oklahoma's offensive coordinator. How big would this be for him to land somebody like a Jaden O'Neal? It's almost kind of like and I guess ironically, especially for people around here, it's kind of ironic that it's Seth Luttrell going into Southern California to pick off, or would be picking off one of the better quarterbacks in that 2026 class if they get the news that I think a lot of people expect on Monday afternoon.
I don't know about you, Eddie, but I'm ready to see OU Twitter, what that's going to look like after the Jaden O'Neal announcement, if it is Oklahoma.
It would be very, decisively one-sided for, somebody, one of our friends out west.
Absolutely. We talked about it a bit last week. I just think with what he's done here, like you said, I mean, to go out to Southern California to answer that, I mean, 2025, obviously, Kevin Sperry was already committed. He's done a great job, kind of building that relationship, making Kevin comfortable. When, I think when Jeff Lebby left, there was legitimate concern of, is Oklahoma going to hang on to Kevin Sperry? What's the class going to look like? He's done a really good job kind of stabilizing that ground and just making sure Oklahoma could move forward with this offensive class. And now we're starting to see it pick up steam, with guys like Manny Choice. And, obviously with them hoping for some more offensive line commitments in the near future. What I think is really interesting with Seth is just kind of how you look at this 2026 group. If they can land Jaden O'Neal, that's 3 commitments, and it's Jonathan Hatton, who is a top 5 running back in the country, Jaden O'Neal, who isn't currently ranked there, but wouldn't shock me at all if he ends up as a top 5 or 6 quarterback in the country in the 2026 class, and Ryder Mix, who I think, Eddie, I can speak for both of us, just saying how impressive he was at camp. And if that's your starting point, and I know Jaden O'Neal has a relationship with Caden Jones at Jinx, and he'll try to bring him to Oklahoma with him. If Jaden is to pick Oklahoma, wherever Jaden's going, obviously Caden will be part of his recruiting plans. So I think it tells you a lot. I mean, like, they are hitting the ground running offensively. And I think over the last couple of years, maybe it's been a reverse where you've seen the defensive recruiting kind of, I don't want to say lead the way, but maybe a few more of the premier kind of star players. Maybe Seth Luttrell can be, kind of against what many of us expected, kind of be the impetus to seeing that offensive group really get rolling.
Should be interesting. Continued good news today, though. Just to recap, Emmanuel Choice, now part of the 2025 class. Still possibly waiting on some news from C.J. Nixon, the star out of Weatherford, which, obviously it sounds like he was in Norbit over the weekend. It doesn't even sound like. We know he was in Norbit over the weekend. Just kind of waiting it out to see when he wants to make an announcement, having Oklahoma and Oklahoma State in his top 2 for the in-state star. And then obviously coming up on Monday, possibly big news from Narbonne High School out in California, 2026 quarterback Jaden O'Neal, which, I think obviously there's going to be a lot of people paying attention to that. And we'll be right here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel. If that does go Oklahoma's way, we'll have plenty of breakdown and coverage of what that could be. But for today, it's Emmanuel Choice joining Oklahoma's class. And, again, Josh, just to kind of close and wrap things up from the weekend, it sounds like it was a successful weekend and something that we had previewed on Friday with so many guys coming in for the official visits over the weekend.
Yeah, just an absolutely huge official visit weekend. And I did want to add as a quick note, because I know there's going to be people hanging at the end here. Congratulations for making it here in the video. But Brandon Brown, the Florida defensive lineman that is a Texas commitment, I don't know this kid well enough to say I know what the situation is or what it's going to look like. But I'm told that visit went really well. I think, and it's going to surprise no one, that this staff really connected with Mom. I think they really did a lot to put her, kind of at ease. Now, this is his first trip to Oklahoma. There was a lot of ground to make up. So I'm certainly not making any promises or any guarantees. We'll see what happens. But I do think Oklahoma, at least gave them something to think about. We could put it that way at this point.
Never a bad thing when you're talking about, 4 borderline 5-star type defensive tackles. And certainly, I think, if there's anything, it's almost become a little bit of a theme of the first 2.5, 3 years of Miguel Chavis and Todd Bates and Dorman. Seems like they're hitting the right notes with the parents when they come on some of these official visits. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is just a staff that, when I was talking to a parent of a recruit earlier today, actually, that, somebody was there on campus, and they were just talking about how different Oklahoma is in their ability to develop relationships. They are just very unique. It's very, I wouldn't say singular to Oklahoma, but it doesn't take long to call roll. I mean, that would be the way I would say that. Oklahoma is very, very good at not just, being chummy and friendly, because that stuff's, a lot of guys can do that. But I think they are very good at getting down to the core of a kid. Like, what is important to him? What does he value? What are things, when he comes on the visit, what doesn't he like? What does he like? Like, they have a very refined view of what they're looking for, I guess not what they're looking for, but really what they need to do on a trip to make everybody comfortable, not just the player, but mom, dad, who's going to be there? Is it brothers, sisters, whoever it may be? That they really do a good job connecting and make those people feel part of everything they've got going at Oklahoma.
Very good. That is going to do it for a Sunday night recruiting report. Plenty of recruiting news. I mean, you talk about, maybe the next couple of weeks being pretty busy in terms of, not just, getting ready for everything that's to come with the official SEC announcement on Monday or next Monday, but everything that goes into kind of the wrap up of a summer that all of a sudden I think we're going to blink and then all of a sudden, a bunch of these high school kids are going to be obviously getting ready for the start of their sophomore, junior, senior seasons. And, obviously we'll be getting ready for Oklahoma's first season in the Southeastern Conference. Still kind of weird to say. Josh, we appreciate it. We'll be kind of keeping an eye on everything to come. And, particularly the Monday afternoon announcement of 2026 quarterback Jaden O'Neal will be headed to Oklahoma and kind of joining that, a pretty illustrious list of quarterbacks and certainly quarterback commitments here moving forward. So for Josh, I'm Eddie. We'll see you right back here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube page.